Speaking of Sydney, I want to go to the former Liberal MP for Mackellar, Jason Falinski. Jason, thanks so much for your time. Barnaby Joyce, he's got one foot out the door to the Nats. It seems he's heading in the direction of One Nation. What does this mean for the coalition?
Not much really, Laura. I think it just means that the realignment that's been occurring for some time is, underway. Barnaby joining One Nation, I think, makes perfect sense for the coalition and, frankly, the sorts of issues that he wants to campaign on.
Has he been an impediment?
Well, I mean, in some areas he's been a great asset. In other areas, yes, he's been a distraction and he's reduced the coalition's votes in those areas. And you're going to ask me which areas, so why don't I just go straight to that?
Please do.
Which is, in a lot of urban areas across Australia, Barnaby got vilified, I think unfairly, and became a talisman for how the Liberal Party particularly, but the coalition generally, had shifted to right-wing for the sensibilities and value sets of people living in those communities.
Sure, but Jason, isn't that a bit rich? I mean, Barnaby was speaking to the people that he needed to vote for him, whether that be when he was in the Senate or whether he was the member in St George or the member for New England. Isn't that a failure of the city moderates or Conservatives?
Oh, sure, Laura. I think there's enough blame to go around, and to the extent that I have to accept responsibility, I'm very happy to do that. The question is not to go over what's happened in the past, but rather to look forward to the future. And I think there's an argument that we have not had since, or the argument that we should have had in 2007, which we never had, which is around who does the Liberal Party want to represent and what values do we want to fight for and what does that look like in a coalition? And those arguments just weren't had for a whole variety of reasons. And now we're finally having those discussions. And look, in an historical perspective, this is exactly what happened in the late 80s and early 90s. And it resulted in the Howard government that was, I think, by any reasonable measure, certainly by contemporary measures, a successful government that lasted, over a decade. So these are good arguments to have, and I think that we have suffered by avoiding and averting from them.
How's it going now, do you think? I mean, we're having this conversation a week after James Paterson essentially pleaded with his party to stop with the collective therapy session. And then you kind of have, I don't know, what are the values? Are they still those traditional Liberal values that you've always adhered to, or are we seeing a moment of change?
Look, I think that in Anglosphere Western democracies, the value sets around freedom and fairness, which are most associated with classical Liberal parties, are the ones that are still held by the largest group of people in the community. They're the values that traditionally the Liberal Party under Robert Menzies, John Howard, not so much under Malcolm Fraser, both represented and implemented. That is when we are most successful, when we're doing those things. I think in our last term of government, we drifted away from that to more conservative values around sanctity and order, and that resulted in the left being able to encroach on our ground. At the last election, that became really evident when we voted against tax cuts, which is sort of an indication, policies are an indication to your underlying value sets. And when we were voting against lower taxes, that sent a message to a lot of people who we had traditionally fought for and represented that maybe we weren't as keen on that value of freedom as we had been. And so that resulted in a lot of those people moving across the aisle and seeing that as permission to vote for other political parties. I think, yes, what James is saying is right, which is we've got to stop the let's look back and blame people and, okay, we are where we are. What are we going to do moving forward? And I'm sure I know that there are a lot of people in Canberra just sort of shaking their head at what's going on. But I would say to them that this process is not going to be pretty. It is going to be messy, but we have suffered because we didn't have these discussions a decade and a half ago.
Nope, it ain't pretty, that's for sure. Jason Falinski, thanks so much for your time today. Appreciate it. We'll speak soon. And that